Listen carefully for the next few minutes, because what I'm about to tell you is not motivational, it is not comforting, and it is not designed to make you feel good. It is designed to make you question the one thing you almost never question, the thing you call me. You walk around assuming there is a solid, continuous self, behind your eyes, inside your head, owning your thoughts, steering your choices, and living your life. I'm going to argue that this me is the greatest psychological trick ever played on human consciousness, and that your entire experience of reality is being bent, filtered, and distorted by it right now. If you stay with this to the end, you may not feel lighter or happier, but you will understand your mind differently, and once you see how the illusion works, you can no longer fully believe in it. Something in you steps back, and that distance is the beginning of real freedom. Let's start with something simple. When you say I, who exactly are you referring to? You might think you mean your personality, your memories, your preferences, your body, your story, but notice that all of these are changing constantly. Your body changes every year. Your opinions shift. Your memories are edited and rewritten. Your roles, student, parent, partner, outsider, come and go. Yet you insist there is a stable me behind all of this, a kind of invisible owner that remains the same while everything else moves. This is the first part of the trick. The mind creates the sense of a center that is never directly observed, only assumed. You have experiences, thoughts, and emotions, and then the mind quietly adds a label, mine. The thought appears, I am not good enough. Instantly, without checking, you believe there is an I who owns that thought and is being described by it. You do not ask where the thought came from or why it appeared at that moment. You don't question the authority of the voice. You just accept that this is you speaking about you. This is how the illusion of self anchors itself, through unexamined ownership. You are not taught to investigate thoughts as events happening in consciousness. You are taught to treat them as personal truths. The mind produces content, and a fictional character, the me, steps in and takes credit or blame for all of it. Now let's look at this from psychology and neuroscience. The brain is not a passive camera recording reality. It is a prediction machine. It constantly produces models of the world to guess what will happen next, so you can react efficiently and survive. It predicts sounds, movements, outcomes, and also other people's behavior. But it doesn't stop there. The brain also builds a model of you, a user profile that it can predict, stabilize, and maintain. It tracks your habits, your usual reactions, your fears, your desires. It bundles these patterns into a narrative. This is who I am. That narrative is useful for coordination. It helps you act somewhat consistently. However, this model of self is still just that, a model. It is a simulation running inside the brain, updated moment by moment. It's like a character in a video game that the system keeps updating: level, skills, status, story. The problem arises when the character starts to believe it is the player, when the model of you forgets that it is a model and claims to be the real thing. The brain predicts what you would do or feel in a situation, and then reality is bent to fit that expectation. You say, I always react like this. I'm the kind of person who, these are prediction statements, not eternal truths. But as they repeat, they become identity. You wear your predictions about yourself as if they are your essence. So the me you defend is largely a prediction artifact, a convenient internal avatar kept in place so the system doesn't have to figure itself out from scratch every morning. The cost of this convenience is that your sense of possibility shrinks to fit this predicted identity. The model becomes a prison. Another layer of this trick is language. Before you had language, you had raw experience, sensations, colors, sounds, discomfort, curiosity. No separate narrator. Then adults around you began to attach words to things, including you. This is your name. This is your toy. You are a good boy. You are a bad girl. You are smart. You are lazy. Slowly, the child absorbs not just words, but the structure of subject and object. I like this. I am angry. That is mine. Language does not merely describe reality. It partitions it. It draws a line between I and not I. Once that line appears, the brain has a new task: maintain the integrity of the I side at all costs. This is where labels become dangerous. I am shy. I am confident. I am broken. I am special. Each label is a simplification of a living, changing process. But once uttered enough times, it solidifies into identity. You begin to behave in ways that confirm the label, because the brain is biased toward consistency. It wants the story to hang together. Culture then amplifies this. You are given categories: nationality, religion, class, gender, profession. You begin to stack these identity markers until the simple fact of being conscious is buried under layers of socially constructed me. You do not wake up in the morning as awareness. You wake up as your name, your problems, your to-do list, your role. Yet underneath all of this, there is still only experience unfolding, thoughts, feelings, and sensations arising in awareness. The word me is a pointer, not a thing. But almost everyone forgets this and lives their entire life defending the pointer. Nations go to war over collective versions of this pointer. People suffer for decades because the pointer has been associated with shame, failure, or not enoughness. To understand why the illusion of me is so persistent, you have to see its evolutionary role. The self is not just a story. It is also a defense system. Its job is to protect the organism's survival and status. It monitors threats, not just physical ones, but social threats: rejection, humiliation, exclusion, loss of reputation. Whenever something challenges your image of yourself, the defense system activates. You feel it as anger, embarrassment, anxiety, or defensiveness. Someone criticizes your work, and immediately the internal lawyer shows up to explain why they're wrong or unfair. The system is not checking for truth, it is protecting the narrative of me. This is why it's so difficult to change deeply held beliefs. If a belief is tied to your sense of self, then questioning it feels like a kind of death. The self reacts as if it is being attacked. It would rather distort reality than allow the narrative to collapse. So you see denial, rationalization, projection. All these psychological mechanisms are there to keep the self intact. The irony is that this protection often becomes the source of suffering. The self clings to a fixed image in a world that is fluid. It resists change in a reality that is change. It insists on being right in a universe that is far too complex for any single perspective to be absolutely right. The result is chronic tension between how things are and how the me insists they must be. Though the illusion is not neutral, it actively maintains itself by filtering and distorting experience. You do not simply see the world, you see a world that supports your self-story. Anything that threatens it is minimized, ignored, or demonized. Anything that confirms it is amplified. In this way, the me becomes a kind of internal propaganda machine. We tend to imagine perception as a window. You open your eyes, and there is the world. But perception is more like a negotiation between incoming data and pre-existing models. Your brain receives incomplete signals and then fills in the gaps from memory and expectation. What you see is not raw reality, it is reality interpreted through your history. Now add the self to this. The me is one of the strongest filters you have. You don't just see events, you see what they mean for you. Two people can experience the same situation and live in completely different worlds psychologically because their self-models interpret it differently. One sees opportunity, the other sees threat. One sees proof of worth, the other sees proof of failure. Your senses deliver data, but your self decides what counts. You walk into a room and immediately scan for cues. Who is looking at me? What do they think of me? Do I belong here? The environment becomes a mirror reflecting back the me you believe yourself to be. This is why social situations can feel so intense. They are not just events, they are tests of identity. Here is the crucial point. If the self is an illusion, then the emotional weight you attach to these interpretations is also misallocated. You are suffering over a character that exists primarily in your head. The actual present moment experience, sounds, colors, sensations, is usually neutral. It is the story about what it means for me that generates turmoil. This is not advice to become indifferent or detached in a shallow way. It is an invitation to see how much of your psychological pain is tied to the defense of a narrative. You are constantly editing reality to preserve an internal fiction. The cost is clarity. The cost is contact with what is actually happening right now beyond the story. Modern neuroscience has identified something called the default mode network, a set of brain regions that become active when you are not focused on a specific task. When your mind is wandering, daydreaming, remembering the past, imagining the future, or thinking about yourself, this network lights up. In other words, when you are left alone with nothing to do, your brain automatically begins producing the story of me. It replays old events, projects them into imagined futures, rehearses conversations, rebuilds grievances, fantasizes about recognition or revenge. The default is selfing, creating and maintaining the sense of a personal center. Now notice what this means. You don't have to make an effort to be yourself. The system does it for you. It is the background hum of consciousness in modern humans. This is why silence feels uncomfortable for many people. When external stimulation drops, the inner narrator gets louder, and you are confronted with the raw machinery of your own identity fabrication. Practices like meditation, psychedelic exploration in serious contexts, or deep contemplative inquiry temporarily disrupt this default mode. They can reduce its activity, and with it, the grip of the self-story. People report experiences of spaciousness, unity, or selfless awareness, not in a mystical, fluffy sense, but as a direct perception that the usual me is not present. When that happens, what is left is still experience, sights, sounds, sensations, thoughts. But there is no one in the center claiming ownership. This is deeply unsettling to the self because it reveals that it is optional. The system can function without a tightly held me. That realization is one of the most destabilizing and liberating discoveries a human can make. At this point, a common fear arises. If the self is an illusion, does that mean I don't exist? Does that mean nothing matters? This is the self's last defense. It equates its own disappearance with annihilation. It treats the deconstruction of identity as a threat to basic existence. But look closely. Right now, as you listen to these words, experience is happening, hearing, thinking, maybe some emotional responses, maybe bodily sensations. None of this requires a solid, fixed me. The content is there, whether you add the label mine or not. The movie is playing. The character in the story is not the same as the screen. The illusion is not that there is experience. The illusion is that there is a separate owner of experience, an inner controller who sits behind the scenes pulling levers. When you search for this controller directly, in sensation, in thought, in memory, you find processes, patterns, and events, but no single stable entity that can be pinned down as I. What disappears under analysis is not life, but the imagined manager of life. The behavior continues. The body breathes, moves, speaks, decisions appear. Actions are taken. The idea that there must be a little homunculus inside doing it all is just that, an idea. It was imported from culture and never properly inspected. When this is understood, the fear begins to loosen. You see that what you are is not the story, but the field in which the story appears. That field does not vanish when the story shifts. In fact, it becomes clearer. Existence is not at risk. Only the fiction of being a separate, isolated me is at risk, and that fiction has been the source of a great deal of confusion and suffering. Now let's expand this beyond the individual. The illusion of self has shaped human civilization. Our economic systems are built on the idea of separate agents maximizing self-interest. Our politics are driven by identities clashing for power and recognition. Our technologies amplify the self-story through personalization, profiles, and curated images of who we think we are. At one level, this has been a powerful engine. It has driven competition, innovation, and survival. But at another level, it has trapped us in a narrow band of consciousness. When you believe absolutely in the separate self, your horizon of concern shrinks. You care mostly about me and mine. The rest of the world becomes background, resource, or threat. This limitation is becoming dangerous. We now wield tools, from global networks to planetary-scale technologies, that require a broader sense of identity to use wisely. If we bring a primitive, ego-centered self into these systems, we will use them to reinforce division, addiction, and manipulation. You can already see this in the way social media exploits the self's hunger for validation. Human evolution at this point is not primarily biological. It is psychological and cognitive. It is about whether we can see through the illusion of a rigid, isolated me and recognize that consciousness is not as divided as it appears. This does not mean dissolving into some vague oneness in a sentimental way. It means understanding that the sharp boundaries drawn by the self are functional, not absolute. If enough individuals see this, even partially, behavior changes. You become less reactive when your self-story is threatened. You become less obsessed with status. You are less easily manipulated by fear-based narratives. This shift scales. A culture made of people who are not entirely hypnotized by their own identity is a culture capable of different choices. All of this can sound abstract until you apply it to your own direct experience. So here is a simple experiment you can run in the laboratory of your own mind. First, notice a thought about yourself. For example, I am not doing enough with my life. Instead of accepting it, pause. Ask, who is this I that is not doing enough? Don't answer with more thoughts. Look for it in your experience. Can you find it as a stable object, or do you only find more thoughts, more sensations, more shifting mental images? Next, observe the emotional reaction that thought produces. Maybe there is heaviness in the chest, tension in the stomach, restlessness. Ask again, is this feeling me, or is it happening in me? Can you locate a border where you end and the feeling begins, or is it simply another event arising in awareness? Then, watch how quickly the mind tries to rebuild the story. But of course there is a me. I have a history. I have responsibilities. I have goals. Examine those too. Each is a thought referring to other thoughts, memories, and images. Nowhere in this chain do you find a solid entity. You find a network of references, like a dictionary where every word is defined by other words. This is not a game of clever philosophy. It is a method of loosening the automatic belief in the self. Each time you look for the me and do not find it, the spell weakens a bit. The self may still reappear, and it will, but you no longer grant it absolute authority. It becomes one of many patterns in consciousness, not the unquestioned center. What does life look like if you see through the illusion, at least partially? It doesn't mean you stop using the word I. The linguistic tool is still useful. You still have preferences, relationships, and projects. You still feel joy, grief, anger, and love. The difference is that you no longer mistake these passing states for your core identity. When the self becomes transparent, reactions arise and pass without the same level of stickiness. Someone insults you, and there may be a flash of emotion, but it is seen as a wave in consciousness, not as an attack on some permanent entity that must be defended at all costs. The drama de-intensifies. You don't need to be right as often. You don't need to win every narrative battle. This doesn't make you passive. In fact, it can make action cleaner. When you are not acting to protect a fragile self-image, you can respond more directly to the situation. You can say no without reinforcing a story of being a victim. You can say yes without building a story of being a savior. The behavior may look the same from the outside, but the inner motivation has shifted. You also become more skeptical of your own internal commentary. The mind will still produce judgments. I failed, I'm better than them, I'm doomed. But you see these as weather patterns, not cosmic verdicts. This creates psychological space. Within that space, new responses become available. Creativity increases. Compassion becomes less constrained by self-protection. In short, life continues, but the psychological pressure of always being someone starts to ease. You are less trapped in the greatest psychological trick ever played. We have moved through several layers: the self as a story, as a prediction model, as a defense system, as a product of language, as a pattern in brain activity. Each layer shows the same thing from a different angle. The me is not what you thought it was. It is not the unquestionable center of reality. It is a useful construct that has overstepped its job description. The crucial insight is not to destroy the self, but to see it. To recognize that what you call me is a process, not a thing. It is being assembled in real time, from memories, expectations, sensations, and cultural inputs. It has no fixed core. When this becomes clear, a different relationship to your own mind becomes possible. You can still play the game of identity, but you are no longer completely lost in it. You can inhabit roles without being owned by them. You can navigate desires without believing they define you. You can experience fear without collapsing into it as your only reality. The self continues to appear, but it is recognized as part of the show. From this perspective, the greatest psychological trick is exposed. The trick was to convince consciousness that it is a small, separate self moving through a world of other separate selves. Once that conviction is questioned, the boundaries soften. You begin to sense that what you are is closer to the entire field of experiencing than to any one character in it. So here is where we end and where your work begins. For the next day, watch how often you use the word I in your inner dialogue and out loud. Each time you do, pause for a fraction of a second and silently ask, what exactly am I referring to right now? Not as a philosophical exercise, but as a direct inquiry into your immediate experience. If you follow that question honestly, you will find that the me you have been protecting, defending, comparing, and advertising is far less solid than it appears. You will see gaps in the story. You will notice moments where no self is present, only seeing, hearing, moving, responding. Those gaps are not problems, they are cracks in the illusion. The title of this video, called The Self, the greatest psychological trick ever played. That is not an accusation. It is a description of the situation we find ourselves in as a species. We have inherited a mind that automatically generates a narrative center and then forgets it created it. Waking up, in the deepest sense, is recognizing the trick while it is happening. What you do with that recognition is up to you. You can ignore it and return to the familiar story, or you can continue the investigation, not as a hobby, but as a serious exploration of what it means to be conscious. Either way, the illusion has been pointed out to you. You cannot say you were never told that the me you take for granted may not be what you think it is.